Hey everyone, welcome to the show. I'm here today with Robin Allport. Robin, hello. Good morning. How are you?
Morning, Sanj. How are you doing? Oh, it's evening for you, actually, isn't it?
I'm great. Cheers, mate. Hope you're all right as well.
Very good.
So, Robin, you've had a long time in tech. You've got over 20 years as a dev or working with devs, and now, as a leader in tech. A lot of your time early on and in the middle of your career was as a contractor. You worked for like NatWest, Credit Suisse, General Motors, Getty Images, Price Waterhouse, etc., etc. And then you started a permanent career at Compare the Market, which is where we met. We worked on the same team for like 3 years. You were a senior when you joined. You quickly worked your way up to lead, and you're now an application architect.
That's right. Yeah.
And your time there has only been spent on the marketing tech team.
That's right. Yeah. No, I've been there almost 5 years now. So that's quite a long time in the tech industry, really, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. But hey, you must like it, I guess.
Yeah, I do. I enjoy it there. I think it's a good. I mean, obviously you work there. You know what it's like. It's a good mix. A good mix of interesting work. It's a good environment. It's pretty fast paced. Not obviously the pace of a startup. I mean, you've been at startups as well. I've been there, and that's incredibly fast paced, almost reckless at times. But this, I think, hits a good kind of medium where you've got that a decent pace, but you're also the code quality is great, security's good, and all the rest of it. So it is a good balance, I think.
So your focus is mainly on SEO and performance.
It's kind of morphed into that now. I suppose for many years I was, as you pointed out, I was a front end developer. So I was doing that right from '96 onwards. Where I don't think it was even called front end back then. It was called web designer. For a few years, but yeah. So basically, that's kind of always been my focus. So it's almost natural that's kind of where my career has led, is into that sphere. So even though like my title is application architect, I don't even feel that I'm particularly an architect of sorts. Not your classic kind of diagram drawing architect, but very much focused on the output. From the browser, to output to the client, to the customer. And I mean, in the case of Compare the Market, definitely with a slant on making sure that the focus for search engines is particularly excellent, I suppose. When you're in a competitive market like that, I think, I'm not sure if you're aware, but basically car insurance as a search term is one of the most competitive in the UK market. So it can be the minutest incremental things that you do in your code that can bump you from second place to first place in the search listings, which can mean a crazy amounts of money every day. So it's definitely quite a nuanced but very important part of the infrastructure. I think that a lot of people miss out on. I mean, think back to points in your career. What did you used to think of SEO?
I guess mechanically it made sense. Search engines have to be able to find our stuff one way or another, and you can sort of, cheat a little bit by optimizing a little more.
I mean, from my perspective, up until maybe about 3-4 years ago, I always thought of it as a bit of a con, because effectively, I suppose it's an industry created out of nothing by the search engines, isn't it? And you've got a massive multi-billion worldwide industry created out of nothing. And I always my thought was, well, if you're coding for accessibility and you're coding good semantic HTML with decent content and well written stuff, then surely SEO is. I mean, what do you need it for, really? If your content's good and it's discoverable, then what's your problem? But actually, when you start to really, really dig into it, there beyond the obvious performance stuff to make sure it's fast and everything, there is a lot to it. And it's I think that generic developers' view of SEO as just being a load of snake oil kind of is a thing, and it's been interesting to lift the lid on that anyway from my perspective and see that it isn't all snake oil. it's a lot of different things packaged together in one little term. But when you start to dig down into technical SEO, things like schemas and microdata, performance, or how you put together your HTML, all the different myriad of things in performance, and then all the stuff, link building and all the rest of it, making sure that everything is perfect. Your sitemap's perfect. There's no 404s. You don't have any redirect loops. All these different aspects that flow together. So you don't want to confuse Google. I mean, what? Why would Google be confused? But apparently that's a thing. You can send the wrong signals to a search engine so that it gets confused, and then it might not understand what your website really is. So it's quite deep.
It is very deep, and actually most developers don't have an appreciation or awareness of even how broad or how deep it all goes, right? And it doesn't really form a part of most developers' day-to-day, really, does it?
No, it doesn't. That's totally true. I mean, why would developers be worried about that? As in, I suppose when I was coding more, when I was coding, because I barely code anymore at all, but I was much more focused on what I was building, trying to make that good, trying to make that usable and accessible and all the rest of it. And I wasn't concerned about the business, or the marketing or whatever. I was concerned about the piece of work that I was trying to do, and I think it's quite easy to get into that bubble. Maybe in a small startup environment, you get a little bit more involved in the business, but I think when you're in a larger company, you're much more siloed and in your little pod, as it were.
So, like, you've been an application architect for maybe 2 or 3 years thereabouts, and I assume now you're getting less and less technical. And is that affecting you at all?
And yeah, it can affect you. You end up kind of getting little bursts of imposter syndrome. As
Really?
I mean, I've not done any production code for over 3 years now. In fact, I think the last piece of production code that I did was the boilerplate HTML for Project Sparkles, as you all know and love from Feather Market. So it's been a long time since I've really done any actual production code. I have done, obviously do bits and bobs. I mean, I run a record label on as a hobby. I have done for almost getting on for 20 years now. I spent most of the weekend tinkering around with DNS and Cloudflare and Cloudflare workers and things like that. So I'll kind of noodle around in my own time, but my actual proper day-to-day technical coding skills are, as far as I'm concerned, gone. So in fact, one of my colleagues quite said to me something which I really liked their viewpoint, which was, when you become an engineering manager, and be that a tech lead or an application architect or whatever fancy title you want to call it, you go from having one pair of hands to code with to however many pairs of hands you got in your team. So, in the team that I look after, I've got 12 engineers. So I've got 12 pairs of hands to code with. So it's not, I don't have to be the one coding. And I know full well that, in fact, quite frankly, even the juniors in the team will probably be a better coder than I am now, I would say, which is quite a humbling thing to say after 25 years or odd of working in the industry. I mean, maybe I could point out something what they're doing to improve their code, but I would struggle probably now to build a website from scratch.
This is a very broad and vague question. I hate to even phrase it like this, but do you have any sort of things that stand out to you in terms of lessons that you've learned from leading people?
Yeah, it's a tricky one, isn't it? I think it totally depends on the team. I think a lot of it for me is about trusting your engineers, and earning that trust with the engineers as well. So it's a two-way thing, isn't it? As in, I need to trust that the engineers are good and will be able to do the job, and I can delegate a task to the team and it will get done to a high standard. I mean, so much of it is about trust. So if I'm reporting back on quality assurance standards for the website that we're just about to release, I'm actually basing all of everything in trust in what the team is telling me. Obviously, I can go and look at the tools and everything, but I'm sure there could be smoke and mirrors underneath there. So all of it's about trust. Obviously, I can see the output, and I can look at the website very closely, but so much of it is about trust. So I think that is a major thing. But also it's about, obviously, communication, making sure that everyone's happy and actually enjoying it. Keeping the morale up in the team. You think back to, say, when you were in the team and Compare the Market, it was such a good, well gelled atmosphere. At a certain point, there was a time when the team was quite fractious, and it wasn't an enjoyable experience. But I think we got to a point. It's a lot of it's about hiring the right people with the right attitude. I love the thing of no superheroes. That's definitely something I'd stand by. I'd never hire someone that is all ego and just wants to come in and save the day and code on their own and smash stuff out because they're amazing. No, it's not about that at all. I much prefer that slightly slower paced, I hate the term extreme programming, pair programming, with a view on quality. I'd rather get something out slightly slower that has far fewer bugs, has a much better code quality, is much more performant, than smash something out really quickly just to please marketing and sales and the rest of it. So, when you do that, then the team have trust and pride in the work that they've done, and that then builds morale, and it all kind of it helps to build that. I don't know what's the right word for it. Helps to build a team that has real pride in themselves and their work, and they enjoy it. When you've got a team that are indignant and wound up because they've not won Team of the Month, that's what you want to see. You want a team that are confident. They really think they've done some amazing work, and they really enjoy working with each other. And there's none of that. Oh, Jeff in the corner, he's not very good, is he? You don't want any of that kind of thing. And it's like when you've got a team that really all kind of, they just trust each other. They know that they can turn around to their colleague and their colleague will have some really great advice for them on what to do with some code, and they're not afraid to ask. Allowing the team to have space as well to be able to achieve that. So I suppose as a leader, you need to make sure that pressure doesn't flow down too much onto the team from above. So if you've got multiple stakeholders that are wanting things from the team, don't panic the team with that information. There's no need. Make them feel that they've got time and space to make mistakes and to take risks and to experiment and to innovate and all the rest of it, when actually sometimes they haven't. And and you have to you have to push back on stakeholders. I mean, one of your previous podcast people was Colin Swan, who was absolutely amazing at doing exactly that. A stakeholder would come to him and say, when is this being delivered? He had this amazing way of deflecting that, saying, well, I can't really tell you right now. We're only one sprint in, and we haven't really figured out the complete velocity yet. And we still got a lot of stuff in refinement. And he had this way of just not confusing the stakeholder, but kind of reassuring them that everything's on track. But I'm not going to give you a date. How dare you ask that question? And that's a skill in itself. And then that takes the pressure off the team.
Another thing that I think CCM is really great at is the whole culture. Not only the culture, but the sort of diversity and inclusivity. And, you'll have a great perspective on this, from coming from, probably over a dozen other jobs before that, in a lot of different sectors with a lot of different people. What do you think you're currently doing really well at CCM?
I think a lot of the reason why it's good at Compare the Market is, again, it's the kind of the attitude of the upper management, the openness, really encouraging this from everyone in the company. So, I mean, I look back on my career, and you can definitely see the progression. I look back to my university course. I did IT at Salford, and I graduated in '96. I think in the first year there were maybe 10% of the course were women, and I would say in the final year most of those had dropped out. I think there were 2 women on my course in the final year. A lot of blokes had dropped out as well, but I found that quite interesting. And then you go into industry. I think my first few jobs, there were no female coders at all. Then I think back to maybe five years in. I mean, I remember there was one job I had at ImageNet, which company got bought by Getty Images. I remember for a long period of time there, we had the engineering department all in one room. I mean, it was like 15 of us, all men, and it was, it was not a toxic environment. That's the wrong word for it, but it wasn't healthy. You started to see then, after I remember the next company I was at DBA was a woman. And then I think that was out of a department of maybe 12 people. And then the next company, there was actually a couple of front-end developers that were female. And you start to see more and more. And then at Compare the Market, I mean, I was hired, but our technical lead was female. And it's like, right, that's more like it. And I think it just makes for such a healthier team when you've got a proper mix of ideas and different outlooks, and it does make a massive difference. I think MIT now, the marketing IT at Compare the Market is about a 50-50 split. I'll have to go and count it, but it's not far off if it isn't. And the atmosphere is so healthy. It just so many more kind of views coming in, just the different ways of looking at things, different ways of processing information, much more kind of, I suppose, different attitudes, everything else. It just makes for a much, much healthier team. I think that does come down from the top. I mean, we had a course recently that we did, and it was talking about inclusion and microaggressions and stuff like that. And now, as quite an old school developer, this is something that I'd heard the term microaggressions, didn't really understand what they were. But after watching this, it was so apparent that it's something that happens all the time, everywhere you go. I'll get it from a really pathetic kind of point of view because I'm Welsh. Oh, you like sheep, do you? Just the stupid little jokes like that. And you shouldn't be, it's that the whole kind of, you got your company teaching you that making a point about anyone that's personal is a microaggression.
We touched on optimization. That's basically the bread and butter of what you're doing, and now of the teams that you're overseeing. Give me a sort of broad overview, the gist of what we're talking about, the scale of what's happening.
It took a little while for us to be able to work on these things, but when we started having, I remember we had problems with headroom. So it was like we needed more kind of caching and scalability within the solution so that we were able to cope with more visitors as Compare the Market got bigger and bigger, and we didn't have the capacity. Now, one of the aspects of that is actually if your page is half the size that it is currently, then you're going to be able to serve more of those pages. Because the sheer amount of bandwidth and CPU power and everything else that the servers can cope with, it's going to be easier. So, we started down that path, didn't we? And I think one of the first pieces of work that you did after the initial kind of, make sure the images are crunched and move some of the JavaScript around so it's not render blocking. And you did that piece of work where we took the CSS and refined it, and then took it out of its file and plopped it in the critical path CSS in the top of the page, and then the rest down the bottom. And that made a massive difference to our kind of page speed insight score at the time, or Lighthouse score. And then I think when we combine that with the work we did with AMP and the stakeholders seeing the difference of a page, you get your phone out and you're saying, right, go and type in comparethemarket.com in Google search and click on the page, and they wait for it to load and so on. And, it's quite slow. And then we did that test with AMP, and it's like, right, go and type in pet insurance, and you see the little lightning bolt next to it. That means it's AMP. Now click on the page, bang, straight away, immediate page loads instantly because it was cached behind Google's search. and the response was incredible. It really was. It suddenly resonated with the stakeholders. We saw that the bounce rate went down, the number of people clicking through went up, and it just had an overall positive effect. It had no, I think what one thing that is a bit of a myth is that AMP gives you better SEO. It doesn't. It's just that your overall speed will improve for mobile. Therefore, that is a ranking signal. But AMP in itself doesn't. You could quite easily code a website very, very quickly if you just did extremely good HTML, minimal JavaScript or no JavaScript, and barely any kind of CSS or any third-party scripts or whatever. But anyway, so we went down that path, and then I think once the business understood that this was actually a really good thing, then it became interesting. So then we started chatting to Google about it, as Google became interested once we started working with AMP. So we started that relationship, which was obviously a really positive step. And then we started to kind of bring this knowledge to the rest of the teams in Compare the Market, rest of the product teams, and built this into the overall kind of quality of the website across the entire company. So now we have standards in place where teams need to be hitting 70 Lighthouse score. That's the quality gate, and similar gates for accessibility, similar gates for, now you've got Core Web Vitals as Google's latest thing. So it's about kind of educating. Now for me, I suppose I'll be setting the standards, helping people understand what this means. I mean, explaining cumulative layout shift to 400 people, and why that's important, why it's so really, really annoying when you're scrolling through a website and the page jumps just as you click on the button and you end up clicking on the wrong thing. I'm talking to you, PayPal, with your credit card adverts, which do that, which I reckon they do deliberately. But it's all of these kind of, so there's so many aspects to it. But the journey's been quite long at Compare the Market. AMP was a great way of propelling us into that stage of really understanding why performance was an important thing.
An area which you have a supreme amount of expertise in is getting business buy-in for all of your crazy optimization ideas. Do you have like, I mean, I imagine you could write an entire playbook on exactly how to do this. Can you give me a taste of what kind of things I might experience?
I mean, ultimately, if you can prove it's going to make the business money to do it, that's the first play, right? So if you can say, it's very hard to do because you need a lot of data. So, but if you can say to the business, if you speed up your site by 100 milliseconds, you will earn X amount more per day, they're going to do it. It's a no-brainer. And there are a bunch of companies out there that have done it. Google works with Deloitte and an agency called 55 to kind of do a big deep dive into this. And there was companies like Farfetch that built similar calculators. And certainly in a lot of sectors, it makes a huge difference. Like, I think it's in the luxury sector, they found something like that for each 100 milliseconds, there was a huge lift in people going. So obviously, if you're spending 10 grand on a watch, if the product page is taking ages to load, you're just going to go, I don't trust this company. Why would I spend 10 grand with them? They can't even make a website load properly. But so, bottom line is number one. Secondly, it's just demonstration. I mean, showing yourself against another company where their page is slow and yours is quick. It's just, it is frustrating. It's one of the most frustrating things, a slow loading website. I think there was another study done recently where they were measuring people's heart rate and as a measure of frustration about things on the internet. And slow loading websites came in above pop-ups and broken links and the rest of it. So, I mean, there's definitely that. It's also about maybe it's about a little bit of gamification as well. There's lots of scores involved in web performance, which is always fun. So, if you've got different scores in Lighthouse, it's about, setting thresholds, getting teams to hit green on things. It's about overall quality. It's about the company being able to even brag about it almost in a certain way. If they do hit certain standards, it's about beating the opposition. Surely you want, as a company, you want your website to be faster than your competition. It's a no-brainer. But yeah, it's about going in and understanding as well, I suppose, each stakeholder's needs. Why would a product owner be bothered about performance? I mean, you've got to kind of understand where they're coming from and about their product and what really matters to them. I mean, in the case of Compare the Market, you can understand, say, travel insurance pages being fast because I might be at an airport on my phone and dodgy connection in the middle of Heathrow. Well, not anymore because we're not allowed to go on holiday, but in days gone by, you could have imagined being in Heathrow, looking at travel insurance, and you'd want that page to load quickly because you're probably in a scenario where you're about to get on a plane, you need to do it. Whereas maybe life insurance, maybe it's more important for them to have a couple of extra JavaScript snippets on the page to help people understand life insurance a bit better. I mean, I'm not going to be in any rush to fill out my life insurance form because it's going to take probably weeks to get it all completed anyway. So I think it depends on the product. But definitely, I think it's about understanding stakeholders' needs and making them understand what benefit it's going to give for them. For the sake of SEO, it's a no-brainer. It's a ranking signal. Core Web Vitals from May onwards is a ranking signal. Mobile speed is a ranking signal. So it's a no-brainer. It means if we speed up, if we're faster than our competition, it will be one factor where you're going to get higher rankings. And also, it's just better for the customer if the company, you tug at those strings as well, because I've definitely done that in the past. If you're saying that we're all about the customer, prove it. The customers want a fast website. They want an accessible website. Think about our most vulnerable customer. I was chatting to, at a Google event, actually, I was chatting to someone that worked for RS Components, and they sell stuff for engineers, like as in real engineers, not software engineers, like people that actually build things. and they have an idea of their customer being an engineer in a field with a yellow vest on, working on a telegraph pole, and he's got a crap 3G connection or something. That's their customer. So he's probably got they've probably got a 50 quid phone, a bad connection. The website needs to be fast there so that they can get there. They can order more sprockets or whatever that they need. And that's the customer. And I think once you identify that, you don't want to be building your website for Robin sitting in his nice home office with his iPhone 10 or whatever it is. That's not the right customer to aim for.
Where's performance, SEO, and optimization going right now?
I mean, there's loads of different aspects. I think some of the stuff I've been looking at recently, obviously you got lots of new image formats that are way more progressive and faster than previously. I suppose most websites still using JPEGs and PNGs and stuff. But you got your AVIFs and things like that now, WebP. There's loads of great stuff you can do at the edge as well. That's a lot of things I've been looking at. We work with Cloudflare, who were very supportive of helping us out on that side of things. So with Cloudflare Workers, you can process pages on the edge and do whatever you like with them, really. So let's say you've got lots of different third-party scripts. You can use a Cloudflare Worker to play almost like a Jedi mind trick on the client and say, no, they're not hosted over Google and an AMP project and I don't know, Adobe or whatever. They're actually hosted here. And what it does is it takes the HTML and the worker rewrites, it grabs all those files, it caches them, it rewrites the HTML of where that is hosted so that the client doesn't have to have that extra DNS lookup, SSL, handshake, and all the rest of it for that extra domain. So you cut down all the domains on your site to only needing to hit 1 or 2 domains. You speed your website up massively. Makes a big difference. And technologies like that are absolutely fantastic for performance. Really, really useful stuff.
Cool. Okay. So once again, thank you so much. Really, really appreciate it. And lastly, I'm sorry to do this to you, but before I let you go, I need the joke of the show, please.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah. So I own the world's worst thesaurus. Not only is it awful, it's also awful.
Brilliant. Cheers, Robin. Thank you very much. And that's all, folks. Thanks a lot for tuning in. For more info, for questions, comments, or feedback, please head on over to aheadintech.com and don't forget to subscribe.